On this episode of Real Wins, I ask Chris Arnold rapid fire multifamily questions. We touch everything from industry frustrations to overlooked opportunities. Stick around until the end where I ask Chris for some bonus rapid fire questions that you're going to want to hear. Hello, Chris.
Hello, welcome.
It's been so long since I've seen you on an episode of Real Ones. It feels like forever.
It has been. Life's been pretty chaotic, but we'll probably get to that in a little bit. But I'm glad to be back.
Definitely think we will. Life's been crazy busy. Work's been crazy busy too, but I'm excited. I know our listeners have been waiting patiently for your rapid fire questions.
I don't know if that's true, but maybe there's like one fan out there who's been waiting with bated breath. But hopefully we'll bring them a great episode here.
Let's get into it. So the first question I have for you is, what's the one thing that really frustrates you about the current state of the industry, and how do you work around it?
That's a great question, and I feel like there might be a little redundancy on this call because I think what I'm going to talk about is probably going to come up a few more times. There's this trend that's happening in the industry right now where developers want very, very performant lease ups, but they don't want to budget for that performance. And between, some of the customers that we work with, some calls that I have throughout the months, this is a common occurrence. It's a common theme right now, and it's difficult, right? Because really the only way to work around it is to start and plan ahead far enough in advance to have the budget to tackle a go-to-market strategy with enough time in hand. But a lot of groups just don't think about that, or they hadn't thought about that in the past. And so we're at this place now where it's kind of trying to take a step back and seeing, what do we have to work with? Could we get some more budget to really push this to a better place? And no one project has been the same, I would say, in the last 6 to 9 months. It's been very, very different, although this is a common theme that's run throughout.
For sure. I think, there's marketing and then there's performance marketing. Investing in one and not the other is just, a fast track to a very underwhelming lease up.
It's a situation where the market is tough right now.
Mhm.
Costs are higher. The cost to get money to do projects is a lot higher. And inevitably, marketing, and in this case, we're talking kind of more about the full go-to-market strategy.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, those take the early cuts, and you have to really sort of pick and choose your battles. But when necessary, I think you need to really claw back some funding to make sure that the building is actually, if it's not on the back end, when the building suffers and it's sitting at 60 or 70% leased a year in, that's a big problem, and there's a huge gap.
Totally. And the marketing kind of pays for itself after you get to a certain point where you're meeting your pro forma goals and your absorption is on track or ahead of schedule because of good marketing. And you're saving yourself that extra interest payments each month and the vacancy if you're getting out of debt faster. And I think that's just like a hard thing for developers to visualize up front because they're not marketers. But I definitely, we see it all the time.
Absolutely.
Next question. Which industry trend do you find particularly baffling, and what should we be doing instead?
I was thinking about this, and I really feel like there's this marketing to sales handoff that happens, and there are KPIs associated with those at the lease up level, let's say. And the idea that you can just kind of push all of that responsibility to an on-site team or even a third-party manager. And often that's wrapped up in this idea of start everything 2 months before we open, I think is particularly confusing. What is generally a very, very intelligent group of individuals who are very sharp, very wise, and they're taking big risk with their money to then push that pointy end of the deal towards teams that don't necessarily know how to handle that marketing to sales handoff. It's certainly not the sales piece of it when it comes to leasing, with no head start, with nothing to work from. I probably average 4 to 6 calls a month right now where I'm in different conversations with groups that are having difficulty leasing up a property because there was this assumption that we could wait a really long time. We could rely on this on-site team that we bring in last minute, or a third-party manager that comes in to help lease us up. And it's just not working. It's baffling on a few different levels. But the number one thing for me is isn't that just a huge red flag for losing money for these owners and developers up front? But it's apparently not, which means I think we need to continue to educate why this is such an important part of the business case of leasing up a property.
I totally agree. And I think looking back to my time leasing on site, I had one owner developer who gave budget approval for the on site team to have a clothing stipend because the brand was
Okay.
so cool that we had to dress like we were all like Anthropologie, like walking ads. And, something I see a lot in the market, like as an anecdote for that story, is you have occasionally a really cool property and you're excited and you come in and you have a sales team that's just like very sterile, corporate, not really, they don't really want to be there. And in my experience, like, especially when you're bringing in like real estate agents to sell lease ups, where the stamina looks a lot different and the commission structure is a lot different, that was a huge issue I've seen in the clunkiness between marketing and sales, at least during my time in the DC market. So
Mm.
that's just what comes to mind. All the clothes I got to buy because the developer was so committed to us matching the vibe, and it totally paid off.
Yeah, I've definitely seen different on-site groups posting with their matching outfits on LinkedIn over the last couple of years. Like there are definitely a few groups that continue to pop up every couple of months with like their next matching outfits with everybody on site. I mean, it's I think in the moment it's sort of like funny and cheeky, but I would agree completely that there's brand cohesion right there. And you walk in the door and you have this soup to nuts impression of what this experience is going to be like. So I'm all for it.
Question 3. Can you give us 3 highly specific tactical tips for bringing a property to market in 2025 that actually drives results?
Yes. So I think there's a lot out there in the multifamily marketing world that does not think about ROI or doesn't think about that business case that I was alluding to earlier. The first thing that comes to mind, and if anyone's followed any of our stuff for any length of time, it's you really need to nurture early and often. And that doesn't mean 2 months before you open. That means 6 months, 9 months, 12 months before you open. Why? The answer is maybe unsurprising, but if you're able to activate your property in the construction phase, pull in organic traffic throughout the course of many months, nurture those residents, those potential residents over the course of those many months, and then essentially hand off all of those leads to your on-site team to enable your leasing and sales team to go attack those leads. You're not starting flat-footed. You're starting with often hundreds and hundreds of leads that you can work. And even if we're talking 25% of them end up signing leases, 25% of, say, I'll pick a number, 500 that you didn't have or you wouldn't have if you didn't do any of those motions. So nurture early and often. I think that's critical these days. Number 2 would be this idea of strategy over tactics. We talk a lot about go to market at Authentic, and I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about that on this conversation. But there's this idea that in one bucket, there's a cohesive strategy, and in the other bucket, there's like a bunch of tactics. So like cohesion, having a game plan, and not kind of going up to this buffet, to this menu and saying, okay, great, I want a logo here. I want a template website here. Maybe we need some SEO keyword help there, probably a PPC partner over there. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
And you're kind of pulling in all of these disjointed contractors and vendors, and it just doesn't really work. And so that to me is a plate full of tactics. It's not a plate of a strategy. There's no strategy. It's checking the boxes, and successful properties today need more than that. The last thing I'll say is, and this relates to something that we just talked about, but the on-site team is so important. Having your greenest employees on the front lines is a recipe for disaster. I can't tell you how many times I've personally visited a community, or I've had people come to me in conversation that talk about their experiences with the community and how the person that led them on the tour or gave them information about the property probably could only answer 50% of the questions because they just don't really know what they're doing. They don't know how to sell. They don't know how to ask where you are in your decision-making process. They don't know how to ask questions about, Tori, you and your family and your needs, and when might you be making a decision, and so forth. This was a close second for my baffling question you asked me, because it was like, at the end of the day, who is getting the sales done on site. And so many times it's the greenest employees, and it just doesn't add up for me.
Also, I feel like when you are the sales lead on a project, it's like confidence is so important. A lot of times looking back on my career, like when you're just starting out, like you know nothing. It's really hard to
Mhm.
like fake it till you make it with confidence to sell to people who, you know, when I was leasing in Cleveland, I was qualifying NFL players through their agents. And I'm walking on these tours with people who are worth millions of dollars. And you really have to be confident. You have to be knowledgeable because there's like all different kinds of buying considerations. Obviously, everybody's different and you should treat all renters the same. But like if I was fresh out of, college, high school, and trying to have those conversations and sell those people, it would have looked a lot different. So I totally agree with
Yeah.
you there. Circling back to your second point about the fragmented like strategy versus tactics, we put a line in our TC Insight this weekend that went out on TCAM, and it was like strategy without insights is like sports car with a golf cart engine because you're checking the box and maybe you're trying to be the most cost effective like a golf cart battery, and you put it in this gorgeous project, and golf carts only go like 15 miles per hour. So
Yeah.
I don't know, I just thought of that when I was hearing you make that point, and I love writing our insights.
That was a great point. No.
So, question number four, what's the biggest misconception about brand and marketing in multifamily? And what's the right approach?
I'll make this one short and sweet. It's definitely this idea that if you build it, they come. That is just not the case. Unless you have prime property downtown, thousands and thousands of people walking by or driving by every day, and it's going to be an easier sell for a lease up. That's the 1%. But for the 99%, if you build it, they will not come. You need a strategy, you need a plan. And otherwise, there's going to be a struggle for sure.
I've definitely seen some buildings in DC where you have that foot traffic quality to them in that location and they still won't come. So sometimes even that's not ideal. So I guess I just want to check in. I've been like hammering you with questions so far, midway through. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, not too bad so far. I feel like you're probably got some zingers up your sleeve for me, but right now I'm
We're just warming up. Next question. What is a personal industry topic that you want to dive deeper in 2025? I know on LinkedIn, especially in multifamily, there's a big space for your personal brand and like who you are, like what's your and
yeah.
I'm curious what your and is, Chris.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I've been trying to figure that out the last few years myself. I love LinkedIn. I think it's a great platform, and I've met a lot of really wonderful people through LinkedIn. I think there is space for working parents content, like young parent content. I see that happening a lot more in other industries, and I love to, sort of reflect on my own journey as a young dad, or I guess I'm not that young anymore, but a dad of young kids.
Yeah.
And the thing that the thing that I find fulfilling about that type of reflection is that, yeah, I could write about marketing or brand or strategy, I guess, every day of the week. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of similarities between a lot of those themes. And I just like to break it up with content about my family and maybe some of the revelations I'm having as a dad. There's a broker out of SoCal. His name's Sean Ward, and he's got a big following now, and he does a really great job of balancing really great, insightful work content with really insightful, thoughtful family content. And I follow him just for that reason, because I'm not in the brokerage world. I'm not selling industrial buildings, right? But it's interesting to hear his point of view, and I love to hear his take on raising a family. I think he has maybe one or two more kids than I do that are a little bit older in life, and he's reflecting on their lives as they've been growing up quite consistently. And I think that's really cool.
People want to work with good people. Like people want to have partners who aren't just like stonewalled corporate like, faces. And that's something I would look for when I was on the bidding end of vendors and partnerships was, okay, their service is great. What do I know about them? I think you do a really good job. Also, every single time you post like family content, it just literally makes me tear up. Like there's not enough of that, and keep it coming.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Transforming Cities, brought to you by Authentic, delivering premier multifamily brand experiences and smart digital marketing. Authentic's proven approach accelerates leasing velocity, boosts rental rates, and increases long-term value. You can find out more at authenticff.com. And by Charlesgate, the multifamily investor's secret weapon to help underwrite, go to market, and operate projects that generate market-beating returns. With an adaptive staffing model and on-demand leasing teams, Charlesgate empowers a better resident experience at an efficient cost structure for today's owners. Visit charlesgate.com for more.
Next question. What excites you the most about creative marketing and brand in multifamily right now?
This is another one where I feel like it's maybe an obvious low-hanging fruit answer, but I think that the industry is still really ripe for being different, being bold, having the courage to stand out in your markets. And I think this is happening and has been happening with owners and developers they have trust in their creative teams, I'll say, whether that's internal or external teams. The projects that really stand out, that get highlighted the most, that people repost about all the time, are the ones that stand out. They dared to be different and they did a really good job. You don't hear about the 90% of multifamily projects that kind of look and feel the same because everything's being value engineered. It's still a time and a place where you can do great work by being different and make a huge splash.
What is the biggest misunderstanding about go-to-market in residential real estate today, and how should developers start rethinking that misunderstanding?
So GDM, or go-to-market, I think feels relatively new in the multifamily industry in terms of this context around bringing a property to a stabilized place. For a long time in the industry, it's really been, again, this like tactics over strategy approach. And I think that's why we see so many, multifamily companies sprinkled across the landscape of vendors in terms of vendor options. There's a company that does this widget, a company that does that widget, and they're all sort of solving a very singular, narrowly focused issue, let's say, in the life cycle of this go-to-market process. And I think developers really need to take a step back, see that forest through the trees, and really kind of take those things with a grain of salt and really put together and work with someone, ideally, who can help them put together a strategy and then figure out what tactics they can layer into that strategy to really be successful in going to market.
I'm getting war flashbacks to my spreadsheets I used to have when I was a regional, of all the vendors that we needed to get in touch with every time we acquired a property, to stand up the website, to get the widgets live, go through compliance and print factories. And I am getting nauseous thinking about it.
Well, there's so many. The thing that I always say, Tori, is that there's so many talented people out there. It's hard as a buyer to know what the right choice is.
Mm-hmm.
And we lose projects all the time that, groups go to like flashy brand agencies. But what I know is going to happen is they're going to get through the brand process and they're going to have a beautiful brand, most likely. Yeah. But then they're going to get a PDF handoff and they're not going to know what to do next. And I think that, to me, is the difference between thinking about go-to-market holistically and strategically versus just sort of picking vendors or picking partners.
Oh, absolutely. And circling back to one of your earlier points about like this fragmented marketing to sales handoff, imagine paying all that money for a very reputable brand agency out of New York or LA, and you get the PDF and you give it to a team who doesn't know what to do with it. And it all for none,
Yeah.
That pains me. Now we're going to go a bit into your backyard. What's one aspect of Denver real estate that you think is underappreciated, and what do you think our listeners should pay more attention to in 2025 and beyond?
This is a tough question because for Denver, I would probably have a different answer 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. I've been here 20 years now, and what I've seen over the last, I'll call it decade at this point, almost a decade, probably the last 6 to 8 years, is that Denver they ushered in a lot of development from out of state. And I know the Dom Beverages out there will shake their head at me at this. I think that just welcoming everyone and everything into a city causes a lot of differentiation in development that I think can net out in a net negative, meaning I've seen so many multifamily projects coming into the Denver market over the last few years with interior design schemes and even architecture schemes, but let's say interior designs that try to match what someone who doesn't live in Colorado thinks that Colorado is, if that makes sense. They come in, they'll put like deers on the wall and they'll do like crazy patterns that are somehow related to the mountains, just like a bunch of sort of knick-knacky cliche type stuff.
Right.
And it just feels so disconnected from what the actual local culture has been and the
Yeah.
kind of the vibe of the area. And so I think there's still this ability to build a really thoughtful project in Denver. And truly, this is probably true in a lot of areas around the country, but to do it in a way that has meaning behind the brand narrative, the on-site experience, and how does it relate to the local community? Because I've seen so many misses come into Denver and the surrounding cities that I just kind of shake my head, because it's like someone in the southeast or the northeast making decisions on a computer and really having no idea.
It reminds me of a really funny subreddit that I saw in development where it's like, what's the Colorado stereotype like you've seen in person? And somebody was describing, like, I ran into this guy in a coffee shop who had like a big hiker backpack on, and like they were just listing all these Denver stereotypes, and they were like, this is like the problem. Nobody wants to feel stereotyped, especially in a luxury community that's charging market rent. We've seen that a lot in like Annapolis. Like, unfortunately, there's some places you walk in and it's just like sailing, like
Mm,
boats and military, which is like very much like
yeah.
Annapolis culture. But the
The
local,
nautical theme.
we all leave on the holidays. Like, we're not in the capital region for July. Like, we rent our houses out and we go. Like, we don't need that like shoved in our face. But yeah, that's tough. And honestly, like eye opening, because I think that's a very real issue, especially
Yeah,
for marketers that don't do their due diligence. And
totally.
nobody's raising their hand in those meetings and being like, this might actually like come across as a little insensitive or tone deaf or embarrassing for us. Last question. What is one market or city you would love to break into with Authentic and our friends over at Charlesgate together?
We have not done a lot on the West Coast. And I think that there's a lot of negativity coming out of the West Coast. In my mind, I'm thinking of California and a lot of some of the natural disasters and politics and cost of living and so forth. But, I still think that there, for whatever reason, I see a lot of attention to detail in architecture, interiors, and there's this very sort of forward thinking design concepts that come out of a lot of West Coast cities, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, certainly, Orange County, LA area. And it'd be cool. It'd be cool to work with some developers that get it, that are building cool things, and they want to do things differently. I think that'd be awesome.
I agree. I've been watching the LA market closely, especially following the wildfires, which we've been covering a bit in our TCPM newsletter. We've been featuring some communities out there and linking to donations to support the community. But there's, even in spite of it, like I just saw a post today that there's a new development going up in Altadena, which was hit really hard by the Eaton fire in Pasadena area. And it's like they're so resilient out there. And I think,
Mm,
that's just me having a magnifying glass on California, because I was curious, like, what's going to happen, especially in my neck of the woods in Georgia, experiencing a hurricane earlier this year. I'm like fascinated by communities' ability to allocate resources and start building again and house people who lost their homes so quickly, largely in part due to multifamily. So, love that.
man.
Well, I have some bonus questions for you so we can end this video on a high note. My first silly question is, you recently welcomed your second son. Congratulations. Which one's your favorite?
No parent can say they have a favorite until their kids are a little bit older. I just don't know my kids well enough yet. I love my 4-year old. He's becoming really cool and fun to hang out with. But our other son, he's 5 months now, and he just started giving me the biggest smile. So I love him so much. Hard to say. When they get to their prime opinionated years, we could circle back to this question.
Yeah, I hear like the 12 to 18-year-old range is like the best year for making that decision on who's your favorite.
Yeah,
Next question. If you had a genie in a bottle grant you three wishes, what would they be? And you can't wish for more wishes because we've been burned by that.
because that was going to be my answer. Um, 3 wishes. Number one would be being able to buy more time. I think life, the older I get, I realize how little time we have with the people we care about. So time would be one. Having no worries about finances or money, and being able to focus on the things that really bring us joy. I think by default, that would be an interesting place to be. And the third one would probably just be, more great memories with friends and family, being able to have the time to foster that. I think as a new parent, that becomes so much more difficult. Sometimes my wife and I reflect on some of our great memories before having kids, which just a different life phase. But it's easy to take those things for granted as they happen in your life. It's a good reminder to be thankful along the way.
Very nice. Next, if you owned your own Lisa, what would you name it? Like rapid fire, don't overthink it, and where would it be?
Right now, so I live in Colorado Springs now. I would say it'd be somewhere on the west side, or maybe even like Manitou Springs, just like up against the mountains. Um, and I'd call it the Depot.
Aw, why the depot?
Because it can be this place where people come to hang, connect. Maybe there's a coffee shop concept in the basement, maybe a like afternoon happy hour, a little bar that pops up, and people just kind of come and go. They live there, they can work there, they can run out, do the incline, do a hike, mountain bike. I think that'd be sweet.
That would be so sweet. Would you keep the co-working space open to the public or just to residents?
Definitely open to the public for another stream of revenue for sure.
Love it. And then lastly, what was the last song you listened to?
Right now, I am big time into Yacht Club. So it was probably, I don't know what song it was, but I've been a big fan of Yacht Club for a few years now. So I just kind of throw that on when I'm just ready to feel good and do some work.
This was so much fun. I feel like I learned a lot about you despite working together for almost a year now. And I'm excited for our listeners and anyone who might stumble across this video to get a better look at Chris Arnold.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for leading us through this, Tori. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, I'll see you next time.